today's video, we'll be taking a look at some of my personal favorite photographers and doing a deep dive into analyzing some of their best photos to find out what goes into making a great composition. So the first thing that you might notice about all these photos that I've shown so far is that every single one of them has a very clear subject, a point in the photo that commands our attention, whether it's to sell a certain feeling or emotion or draw attention to a character or a product. Elite photographers are very intentional with the way that they draw your attention into an image. One of the biggest reasons that they are able to do this is because our eyes love contrast. As soon as an image is put in front of our eyes, our brain responds with a question, where am I supposed to look? It's important to understand that the viewer will always be attracted to the brightest or most contrasty part of an image. So if you can create contrast around the subject or focal point of the photo, you've done most of the work in making that photo legible or easy to read. Creating contrast is actually simple. So let's take color out of the equation first and focus purely on black and white images. Placing pure white against pure black is much higher contrast than gray against gray, even if those two gray colors are slightly different. The more different two individual tones are, the more contrast. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that increasing the contrast of your photo in a tool like Lightroom will make it easier to look at. Probably the opposite might be true. However, it's very important to pay attention to where the area of highest contrast is in your photo and make sure you don't place it in an area that is irrelevant to the point or the subject of the photo. I see this quite often with beginner portrait photographers. They place the person's face, the subject, in the image over a very bright and distracting background. Even on a busy background, careful placement of your subject can change everything. There are so many compositional elements here in the photo, although the photographer is still able to place the subject in an area of the frame that doesn't distract the viewer from the focal point. If the subject were placed in front of the wall or the structure in the background, or if the umbrella was slightly lower behind the model's head, I don't think this image would have the same impact. You can also use the lighting in your scene to create good contrast. Using a bright source of light to illuminate your subject against a dark background is one example, or using backlight, so lighting coming from behind the subject, to create a bright edge. And this is always an easy way of lifting the subject off the background. So next up, let's talk about a very underrated tool, which is using color. So colors can be contrasted by hue, blue on yellow, green on orange, but they can also create contrast by brightness and saturation. Here's a really good example of a bright yellow against a definitely more desaturated yellow, and this still creates a lot of contrast, even though they're technically the same hue. This image here by photographer Nick Prideaux demonstrates such a great understanding of contrast and complementary colors. And if you want to learn more about what complementary colors are, I'll leave a little link in the description down below. So in this image, we have dark hair over slightly brighter water, bright skin over darker water, and a beautiful contrast between the bright orange of the skin and the dark green of the water. And I just think this is such a great example of, first of all, using the color's hue to create contrast, but also creating contrast by layering darker colors over brighter colors and then brighter colors over darker colors. The thing is with this photo is that even if you converted it to black and white, it would still work because of the tonal brightness in the photo. I've definitely learned a lot from my favorite photographers about color, and it's one of the things that I've been really trying to master and implement into my work when it comes to picking wardrobe, picking locations, even the post-editing process when you're making slight tweaks to those colors. I've really been trying to pair complementary colors and do my best to create as much contrast and interest in my photos as I can. Balance is another huge contributor to great compositions. If you have a subject on one side of the frame, using complementary subjects of equal or similar visual weight helps to give the image a sense of balance and harmony. This is a perfect example. We have a subject in the center of the frame, and the shadow of the subject below is casting off to the right of frame. And it's just beautifully balanced by the island off the coast, which is in sort of the top left of the frame. And it just adds a really beautiful sense of balance, and it's very subtle. You don't notice it right away, but then when you actually analyze the photo and break it down, you can see that balance playing out there. And then another example, this image by Avery Sweat well. The two windows or openings in the building, they kind of mirror each other in this photo, but it also allows the subject to fill the space in between, which also creates a beautiful contrast with the white top on the dark background. So again, we're talking about tonal contrast and adding like multiple compositional elements in here. And this works really well. You also have that backlighting in there that's lifting the subject off the background. So this image actually works for so many different reasons. And then last of all, this amazing series by Marco Klarhold, hopefully I'm pronouncing that name correctly. And this is a great example of using elements in the environment to create a story. The background, the foreground, it's all just coming together and it has a beautiful balance to it. So to recap, make sure that the subject in your photograph is clear. Use contrast with the bright and dark areas of your photo, as well as color contrast. And lastly, ensure that your images have a sense of balance to them. Think about your foreground and background. Do they contribute to the overall composition or take away from it? So you will inevitably, if you shoot long enough, create images that have all of these attributes. But truly understanding the attributes that go into creating a good composition will help you to notice them in everyday life. And then you'll be able to start integrating them into your own work. So hopefully this video helps you in your journey to create amazing photographs. And if it did, please make sure you leave a like down below and definitely subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.